And the fraud is mind-boggling. It's not hundreds of dollars. It's not thousands of dollars. It's not tens of thousands of dollars. It's not even millions of dollars. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in fraud and theft and robbery across a multi-year investigation.
On October 23, 2025, the basketball world was rocked by an unprecedented FBI operation that sent shockwaves through the entire sports community. Agents stormed homes across 11 states, arresting Hall of Famers, current coaches, and star players in a sweeping crackdown that exposed tens of millions of dollars in fraud, rigged games, and alleged ties to 4 mafia families secretly controlling the NBA from the shadows. What unfolded wasn't just another sports scandal. It was the collapse of basketball's very foundation. Picture FBI agents in tactical gear and signature windbreakers converging simultaneously across the country, targeting some of the most recognizable figures in professional basketball. People who once symbolized greatness, integrity, and the competitive spirit of the game. The integrity of the NBA now stood in question, and the sport itself faced an identity crisis unlike anything seen before.
Here in New York to announce a historic arrest across a wide-sweeping criminal enterprise that envelops both the NBA and La Casa Nostra.
This wasn't just another routine investigation or a white-collar crime case destined to fade from the headlines after a few days. This was something far darker, far more complex, and deeply woven into the very fabric of professional basketball. In a move that stunned the nation, the FBI announced a massive federal operation codenamed Nothing But Net, resulting in the arrest of more than 30 individuals across 11 states, including some of the most iconic figures in NBA history and within current league operations. The unsealed indictments, revealed in the Eastern District of New York, opened a Pandora's box of corruption and criminal activity. They exposed not one but 2 deeply connected schemes that could have been lifted straight from a Martin Scorsese crime film or a high-stakes espionage novel. The first involved an insider sports betting network that leveraged confidential NBA information with ruthless precision to manipulate outcomes and profit from the shadows. The second centered around a high-stakes, rigged poker ring funded and protected by 4 of America's most feared organized crime families: the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese clans. These were names that had long haunted law enforcement and evoked chills in anyone familiar with the dark, violent legacy of American organized crime.
What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated takedown across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this case, which is very much ongoing.
He continued.
Not only did we crack into the fraud that these perpetrators committed on the grand stage of the NBA, but we also entered and executed a system of justice against La Casa Nostra to include the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese crime families.
Prosecutors revealed that the criminal network generated tens of millions of dollars in illegal revenue, which was systematically funneled into organized crime operations to fund additional illicit enterprises. Central to these activities was a practice known as spot fixing, the manipulation of specific elements within a game, such as unexpected player exits, sudden injuries, or strategic coaching decisions. These subtle changes didn't always alter the final outcome of games, making them nearly impossible to detect by casual viewers or even seasoned analysts. Among the high-profile names swept up in this massive scandal were some of basketball's most respected figures. Chauncey Billups, head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers and a Hall of Famer celebrated as the 2004 NBA Finals MVP and 5-time All-Star, was arrested in Portland, Oregon. Once viewed as the embodiment of professionalism and integrity, Billups now faces accusations of participating in mafia-backed poker games designed to deceive wealthy players and of allegedly leaking insider information about the Trail Blazers' 2023 tanking strategy. Terry Rozier, a veteran guard for the Miami Heat who had recently signed a 4-year, $97 million contract, was taken into custody at an Orlando hotel. Prosecutors allege that Rozier shared confidential details about player injuries and early substitutions to manipulate betting outcomes in at least 7 games during the 2023 to 2024 seasons. These games reportedly involved multiple teams, including the Hornets, Magic, Blazers, Lakers, and Raptors. Also implicated was Damon Jones, a former NBA player and assistant coach for both the Lakers and Heat. Jones, who won a championship with the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2016, was charged for his alleged involvement in both the insider betting operation and the rigged poker network. Authorities claim he sold injury information concerning superstar players such as LeBron James and Anthony Davis, while also helping lure victims into fixed poker games backed by organized crime families. This scandal doesn't exist in isolation. It builds upon a troubling history of gambling controversies within the NBA. One of the most notable precedents came in 2024, when former Toronto Raptors center Jontay Porter was banned for life and later pled guilty to charges involving prop bet manipulation tied to his spiraling gambling debts. Investigators now allege that Porter's case was not merely an isolated incident but part of the same web of coercion and corruption that connects directly to the current charges. The NBA, which has developed over $1 billion in partnerships with major betting companies such as DraftKings and FanDuel, now finds itself in a precarious position, forced to balance its lucrative gambling relationships with the devastating consequences of this ongoing scandal. In response, the league placed Chauncey Billups on administrative leave, naming assistant coach Tiago Splitter as interim head coach while the Trailblazers attempt to maintain operational stability amid chaos. The scale of the FBI's investigation cannot be overstated. It required massive coordination between federal agencies, state police, and local law enforcement across 11 states. Far from a lucky discovery, this case was the product of a meticulous year-long investigation involving thousands of hours of surveillance, over 3,000 recorded informant calls, detailed tracking of cryptocurrency transactions through blockchain analysis, and careful evidence building to present an airtight case to a federal grand jury. With the NBA's $10 billion annual business now under intense scrutiny amid the nationwide explosion of legalized sports betting, fans, sponsors, and team owners are left asking urgent questions. How deep does this corruption go? How many games have been compromised? Can the integrity of the sport ever be fully restored? The three NBA-connected figures, Billups, Rozier, and Jones, now face an overwhelming array of charges, including wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, illegal gambling, and other related offenses. If convicted, they could face decades behind bars, with enhanced penalties due to their ties to organized crime. To understand the full scale of what authorities are calling one of the most audacious fraud operations in American sports history, investigators are delving deep into the mechanics of these intertwined schemes. The insider betting ring that operated from March 2023 through March 2024, and the mafia-financed poker operations that targeted the elite. Together, they formed a web of corruption that touched 7 NBA teams: the Hornets, Magic, Trailblazers, Lakers, Raptors, Cavaliers, and Heat, tainting the reputations of franchises once considered pillars of the sport.
In December 2022 and March 2024, these defendants perpetrated a scheme to defraud by betting on inside, non-public information about NBA athletes and teams. The non-public information included when specific players would be sitting out future games, or when they would pull themselves out early for purported injuries or illnesses.
The operation's modus operandi was simple and devastatingly effective, relying on 3 key components: insider access to non-public information, a network of bettors willing to place large wagers on predetermined events, and offshore gambling platforms largely beyond U.S. regulatory reach. According to prosecutors, NBA insiders, including players and coaches, leaked confidential details about injuries, illnesses, and tanking strategies to co-conspirators in the gambling world, enabling huge bets on prop markets or outright losses with near certainty. One example cited in the indictment occurred on March 23, 2023, when Terry Rozier allegedly exited a Hornets-Bulls game after 9 minutes with a purported foot injury. More than $150,000 was wagered on his under-20. 5 points, and the conspirators reportedly netted about $17,000. The following day, prosecutors say Shanta Billups provided advance information about the Trailblazers' plan to rest star players for roster evaluation, which led conspirators to place roughly $80,000 on Portland to lose, a bet that paid off when the Blazers lost by 28 points. The indictments portray the insider betting ring as only one tentacle of a far larger criminal enterprise. The other was a rigged high-stakes poker operation that ran from as early as 2019 through 2025 and employed sophisticated cheating technology. Modified shufflers with hidden cameras and wireless transmitters, tables with illicit card-reading equipment, marked decks readable only with special lenses, and chip tray cameras capable of capturing every card. Wealthy victims were lured to underground sessions in luxury locations: the Hamptons, Las Vegas suites, Miami penthouses, and Manhattan hotels, where buy-ins range from $100,000 to $1 million. Prosecutors allege that celebrity face cards drew victims in. Billups reportedly attended 5 to 7 sessions as a primary draw, while Damon Jones allegedly played in more than 10, using his reputation to build trust before the thefts. The scale of the poker operation is described as staggering. Over $7 million in direct losses to victims and more than $20 million laundered through shell companies, cryptocurrency wallets, and international transfers to obscure the money trail. The houses that ran the games allegedly skimmed 10 to 20% of every pot and distributed proceeds according to a hierarchical scheme resembling traditional organized crime operations. Prosecutors further allege the poker ring was backed and protected by 4 organized crime families, which provided enforcement, laundering connections, and operational know-how. Taken together, the indictments paint a picture of intertwined schemes that exploited insider access, modern technology, and elite social networks to siphon millions. Conduct that, if proven at trial, would represent one of the most audacious fraud operations in recent American sports history.
Among these defendants are 13 members and associates of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese crime families, to include capos and soldiers from these families. Additionally, as you heard, current and former NBA coaches and players are also implicated, to include Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier.
When victims of the rigged poker games inevitably fell into debt or threatened to report the operation, the mafia's darker side emerged. According to court documents, enforcers resorted to threats, intimidation, and, in some cases, outright violence. One victim was allegedly robbed at gunpoint and forced to surrender $500,000 worth of jewelry as partial repayment for gambling debts. Other reports describe victims being extorted under threats of physical harm to themselves or their families if they failed to pay up immediately. The message was clear: silence and obedience were not optional. They were mandatory for survival. As the dust begins to settle on what is now being called one of the most consequential scandals in the history of professional basketball, the focus has begun to shift from the shocking revelations to the broader implications. This scandal's ripple effects extend far beyond the courtroom, impacting players, coaches, fans, sponsors, and the entire integrity of the NBA itself. The fallout is expected to reshape how the league, and the world of professional sports as a whole, approaches the increasingly complicated relationship between competition and legalized gambling in the decades to come. At its core, this story is about people. Behind the indictments, statistics, and press releases are real individuals whose lives have been upended. Once respected athletes and coaches now face public disgrace, the possibility of long prison sentences, and permanent exile from the sport to which they devoted their lives. Their reputations, careers, and legacies, carefully built over decades, have been irrevocably damaged. In the wake of the scandal, both the NBA and the National Basketball Players Association, NBPA, issued carefully crafted statements. The league emphasized its commitment to cooperating fully with federal investigators while also reaffirming the fundamental principle of innocent until proven guilty. NBA officials pledged to work closely with the FBI, the Department of Justice, and other agencies to eradicate corruption and restore public trust. The Players Association, however, took a more defensive tone. Its leaders criticized what they described as a media-feeding frenzy and a rush to judgment that, in their view, denied the accused their basic rights to dignity and due process. They reminded the public that being charged is not the same as being convicted and warned that the court of public opinion often moves faster, and with far less fairness, than an actual courtroom. The challenge now lies in how the NBA navigates this crisis, balancing transparency and accountability with fairness and restraint. What began as an FBI sting has evolved into an existential reckoning for professional basketball, forcing the league, its players, and its fans to confront uncomfortable questions about integrity, money, and the true cost of the modern sports gambling boom.
Proud to stand here today with the men and women of the FBI and this legal team. And to the United States Attorney, I just want to thank you personally for taking the time to display the work that the media is about to hear about today in detail. As I said, it does take courageous prosecutors, but it takes a courageous United States Attorney to bring this case, because we are going to take heat for it.
The financial fallout from this scandal is staggering, rippling through every corner of the NBA's ecosystem, from team revenues and sponsorships to player contracts and fan engagement. The teams most directly affected, the Raptors, Trailblazers, and Heat, are already feeling the shockwaves. According to Ticketmaster data, Portland's season opener saw 10% of seats go unsold, a troubling sign for a franchise that was already struggling with fan retention. Merchandise sales have also nosedived. Terry Rozier's Miami Heat jerseys dropped by 15% in October 2025 alone, according to analytics from Fanatics, the NBA's official merchandise partner. These numbers may seem small on paper, but across millions in sales, they represent serious financial losses that could alter salary cap projections and long-term business planning. However, the most significant financial consequences may stem from the NBA's close ties to the gambling industry. Over the past decade, the league has cultivated partnerships worth more than $1 billion with major betting companies like DraftKings and FanDuel. Deals that open new revenue streams through data licensing, live betting integrations, and marketing collaborations. Yet, investor confidence is now shaken. DraftKings and FanDuel stocks fell between 5 to 7% after the Jonte Porter scandal in 2024, and another 3% following the recent arrests in late 2025. The market reaction reflects growing fears of government crackdowns, public backlash, and deeper corruption lurking beneath the surface. In response, the regulatory landscape is shifting rapidly. State and federal lawmakers, who had largely allowed the industry to self-regulate, are now paying close attention. In August 2024, Ontario, Canada, banned NBA player prop bets entirely after the Porter incident. A move that cost sportsbooks millions and set a precedent other jurisdictions are now considering. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, once one of the loudest advocates for legalized sports betting, now finds himself calling for stricter oversight of the very system he helped mainstream. In an October 2024 statement, widely viewed as a reversal of his earlier stance, Silver urged for federal regulation of sports gambling, citing the explosive growth of the $150 billion U.S. betting market and the vulnerabilities exposed by these recent scandals. In the aftermath of the Porter case, the NBA introduced several reforms aimed at protecting the league's integrity. These include mandatory annual gambling education for all players, coaches, and staff, expanded use of U.S. integrity monitoring systems to detect suspicious betting patterns, and tighter restrictions on how injury reports and other sensitive data are distributed. Historically, gambling corruption has haunted American sports for over a century. The parallels are unmistakable, from the 1919 Black Sox scandal, where 8 Chicago White Sox players were banned for throwing the World Series, to the Tim Donaghy scandal in 2007, when an NBA referee admitted to betting on games he officiated. Baseball's Pete Rose, banned for life for betting on his own team, remains another cautionary tale of how gambling can destroy even the most celebrated careers. The Jonte Porter case is particularly alarming because it exposes how vulnerable younger, less paid players can be. Earning about $1.5 million on a two-way contract, Porter reportedly racked up $1 to $2 million in gambling debts through sports betting and cryptocurrency speculation. Under mafia pressure and threats, he was coerced into manipulating his own performance, intentionally underperforming or leaving games early to cash in prop bets. One such instance occurred on January 26, 2024, when Porter played just 4 minutes against the Clippers before leaving with a fabricated eye injury. Over $200,000 in bets on his underperformance yielded roughly $750,000 in profits for the conspirators. Looking ahead, experts predict sweeping changes in how the United States governs sports betting and how leagues protect their integrity. First, expect stronger federal oversight, possibly including a new agency tasked with real-time monitoring of betting patterns across all major platforms. Second, leagues like the NBA will likely impose stricter internal controls, banning all forms of player and coach betting, mandating disclosure of any gambling activity, and enforcing lifetime bans for even minor violations. Third, the relationship between sports and gambling companies may fundamentally change. With reduced dependence on betting sponsorships, fewer in-game betting promotions, and a conscious effort to separate professional sports from gambling's influence. What we're witnessing may very well mark the end of an era, the close of a period of unchecked growth and seemingly limitless potential for the NBA. The league now faces its greatest test, to rebuild trust, restore integrity, and prove that basketball can rise again from one of the darkest chapters in its history. Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.